Alright, so having finally finished Erased, this was something of an interesting show, and not necessarily interesting for all the right reasons, I guess. Uh, it was started out good, I felt. It kind of deviated a bit.
じゃあどうして最初からそう言ってくれないの？アイリだって店長のこと信じたかったのに。
And then it kind of crashed and burned at the last few episodes.
I love you.
So that's kind of what I was just thinking of as the series ended. Is the series was just really good when it first started, and it kind of made me really think about just why those first few episodes it did such a good job of kind of building up the show.
So I started watching Erased. Didn't know much about it other than the fact that it looked kind of like it was going to be the coolest series of the season. I saw a little picture of it on my anime list. It looked cool, and my friends are like, let's watch it. And I was very interested. The pacing was very good. Direction was good. It built up the tension of the series very well. It's a murder mystery. The main character has the power to go back in time by a small amount of time if something bad happens. And he uses this ability in his everyday life. He's also a failed manga artist. So after he witnesses the murder of his mom, he freaks out and he's got to go back in time, like 15 years or something, to figure out the problems, like the murder. So that's where it starts, and that's where the series really started to get my attention.
So that's the thing, because I started this show from actually kind of a different perspective because I started watching it because you told me about its decline in quality. So I kind of went into this actually expecting not much, and I did end up still liking the first few episodes because it started out and it set up a mystery in an overall kind of effective way because it established relationship with Satoru
But yeah,
and his mom, and like you kind of got like a sense of his life, and then she gets murdered. They kind of established something in the first few episodes that really never brought up again, which is that he can, when he fixes time or when he fixes something bad from happening, he mentions in the first episode that usually ends up with something bad for him happening. And then that doesn't really come into play. Well, actually, I think the show thinks it does, but it doesn't. And I'll go into that later when we kind of talk about it, because it really doesn't come up at all until the ending. But yeah, so for the first episode, that was kind of my biggest issue.
it's kind of funny now looking back at it because it's sort of a sign of how the show would eventually get, because it did kind of go for the more sensationalist, over the top portrayal of the murder scene, where he runs away and he's freaking out and the police are after him, immediately suspecting him, even though it makes no sense because it's his mom. Like generally the police would understand that he would be freaking out about the situation. So that was kind of one of a sign of the show relying a bit too much on its over the top antics, as well as the fact that in the first episode he also meets the killer, right? He sees him and he sees that he has red eyes, which the show likes to use a lot to call attention to evil characters. So overall, first episode not too great, but it had an interesting enough atmosphere and good enough execution that it made me want to keep watching.
Well, yeah, so yeah, because like it established an interesting premise, and that's kind of the most you can expect from a first episode, or at least that's the not the most, that's the bare minimum, I guess.
Yeah, the bare minimum.
And it did that. Yeah.
But I mean, it also it established an interesting premise, but it also established that it was fairly competently handled. The plot itself might not have been all there, but the production values and the general direction, the tension of each scene, the pacing, as well as even sort of the dialogue between the characters, that was all very good. And that obviously leads us into episode 2, when the main character actually does go back in time to meet, to his childhood days. And for episodes 2, 3, and 4, we kind of see his efforts to find out what would eventually lead up to this. To look for the killer and see how that he was related to a series of child murders during his childhood days, and it slowly becomes a story that when I was watching this, I personally thought was very interesting because I thought it was going to be a story about how, despite the framing of the murder mystery, most of the story would be about how this guy learned how to live his life again, In the present, he's a failed manga artist. He's 29 years old and he has like a delivery job. He's obviously not very happy or very successful. So I was thinking the focus of the story would be how this guy goes back and he, like, learns all the mistakes he made in his life and tries to fix it, while also chasing for this murder mystery. It'd be a very multifaceted story, with a large focus on the characters and also like a thriller backdrop.
What's funny is that it just literally immediately after the first episode with the killer plot, it's kind of funny because it ends up working as well as it does past that, because the killer plot becomes so much of a backdrop to the point literally where as I was watching the next 3 episodes, like, I had to keep reminding myself that there was a killer in the show.
Yeah,
Because he would be like, oh, I'm doing this to save her, but like it could have just been, I'm doing this to be a good person and to save her from her mom. And like, in all honesty, they kind of were building it up that the mom was going to be the one that killed her. I think it was in the 3rd episode they had a shot where Kaio's mom and Kaio's dad, who was barely a character in the series, by the way, where Kaio's dead body was like in their living room, and they were just like, oh, what are we going to do about this? So I thought it was like, oh, like they're building that up, which at that point I was like, that's kind of weird, because what, did they also just go out and start killing a bunch of kids? Like, did they get a taste for blood after brutalizing their daughter or something? It was just kind of this weird thing. And like, it wasn't really until like the episodes where they go back into the present where like they kind of even really started focusing on the killer plot. It was just the relationship building between Kaio and Satoru, and then that was fine, and then that was good. There's issues I have with Kaio as a character and Satoru, honestly. Like, they weren't necessarily the best of characters, but the development itself was good, and I felt like that's why it worked.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you brought up about the whole parents killing Kaio thing is actually something kind of related to a theory I read about online, where someone thought it would have been better if they had if like the series of child killings had just been unrelated killings, and it would actually feed into this idea of community mistrust that was kind of an underlying theme throughout the show, and that would still allow Satoru to grow and develop as a person without needing this this random serial killer backstory thing, always like looming over what was going on. It could easily have been a situation where maybe these kids wound up getting killed or lost or gravely injured or something because they had no friends and they wound up getting into trouble or whatever. And since throughout the series he makes friends with a lot of these people, not only does he open up, but also these other kids open up to him, and they all become good friends. Community grows, everybody's happy. But this does not happen. In fact, it was just a killer all along. So that was a bit disappointing, but I mean, it worked out fine. Like, the main issue with the show, I think, in my opinion, is just that it did not focus on the great character development that it had in its early episode. The first 3-4 episodes, the relationship between Kaio and Satoru was very strong. Dialogue was good. Everything was well paced and well done. It had a very strong sense of nostalgia of Satoru being able to relive his life and see, like, oh, now I get the chance to do this right, or do it differently. And it showed that he could still sometimes make mistakes, so there's still tension there. But it was a very interesting chance to have a very unique story about somebody being able to like develop their life again and take things in a new direction where that they've never really experienced before. Which kind of brings us what?
So I was gonna say, because that was kind of a weird thing, because I almost thought that, or not necessarily that I thought, but like he was able to go back in time, and like it was interesting seeing him as an adult acting as a kid, and like, and it was interesting, and it was also weird, because he's supposed to kind of be this detached person, and this is kind of like an overall issue with Satoru as a character, but he's supposed to be this detached person, but he's for some reason completely able to like work himself into a role as a kid when he's no longer in that mindset, like actually, and also just get everyone to like him. So, and like he doesn't, and it doesn't. A lot of the kids actually kind of are friends with him to begin with. So actually, yeah, because like that was just kind of like a weird thing about the character. I suppose what it could be is that due to the deaths, that's what made him isolated. But I wasn't entirely sure on that.
No, but see, like
Yeah,
I feel like that was fairly well handled because it's a case where he was kind of like a depressed, lonely adult, and the only person that he really cared about was his mom and like maybe kind of Irie in the future, his coworker. But when he went back in time, I feel like he started off that way. But upon being reminded of the things he took for granted as a child, like he comes home and there's like a nice meal from his mom. He just gets to hang out with his friends and like carefree school days. He never really appreciated those things at that age. And now that he's been 29 with like a dead end job and like no career and just like still living with his mom, I feel like he gets to go back in time, and that's exactly what makes him act like a kid again, or at least have the mindset of a kid. Although he has the intelligence of an adult, he's able to look at these things in like a new light that makes him, almost have like a childish or childlike joy over them, and allows him to like embrace this kind of lifestyle. 'Cause that's what he wants. Yeah, I feel like he seems like the kind of person who never really got the chance to grow up with a happy life, or at the very least, maybe he did, but he didn't quite appreciate it. So now he's getting the chance to appreciate it again. I felt like that's what made the story very interesting.
because when you gotta go through, obviously, when people go through real life, a lot of people look towards their past as like a good thing and kind of like a golden time because it was less complicated. So I suppose that does end up working towards that because he's able, like, he has a sense of purpose now that he's a kid again. Because not only does he have a specific goal, which is, save Kaio and the other kids, but it's also like he has structure in his life again. So I suppose that works towards it because he doesn't really have to work into the mindset. It's that he's naturally going to start adopting that mindset because he's now in a situation where he's always with people to interact with them, as opposed to when you're an adult, you kind of have the freedom to isolate yourself. So that makes it easier to kind of get into that situation.
Yeah, and it leads into like a good lesson, which in addition to the whole community mistrust lesson, of the fact that obviously a community should come together rather than tear each other apart, it would work in terms of a lesson for Satoru himself of, for people to appreciate their childhood, and while, before they have responsibilities, to kind of enjoy that life and, be able to grow up properly, rather than whatever Satoru did, and which we never find out really how most of his life was like, but whatever he did, it led him to be a fairly unhappy person later on. So the chance to do things differently is sort of a wake-up call to him. Obviously, in real life, people can't do that. But you can be like, oh, hey, I don't want to be like Satoru. I'm going to appreciate my childhood.
So let's talk about how the show completely and utterly destroyed all of that in episodes 5 and 6, because all of that goes away. And we have the present episodes in which we're a cast of overall likable and relatable characters are replaced by
Cartoon characters.
Pretty much cartoon
or
characters.
even anime characters. You can say anime. Yeah. It's just a case where it really felt like a strong seinen manga, specifically targeted towards an audience of Satoru's age, people in their mid to late 20s at least, who may have not, had this great of a life and be like, oh, I can relate to this. I wish I had done things differently. Now it goes back into the present, and these characters are much more one-dimensional, much more one-note, and it starts focusing on the murder mystery once again.
Yeah, and then that's where kind of, by that time, that was when it was abundantly clear to me that the murder mystery was only holding the show back, because that was, as I said before, when we were doing when I was watching the first couple episodes, I forgot about the murder mystery completely, and I was enjoying it. And then the murder mystery kind of happened, and I actually have a higher opinion of these episodes, I feel like, than you do, because you were like, this show got derailed here, and I don't feel like the show necessarily got derailed. Now that I'm looking back on it, I have kind of a lower opinion of these episodes because I'm able to look back and kind of see this is where the show went wrong. Whereas when I was watching it, I wasn't like, oh god.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah,
I had a
and,
pretty
like,
bad reaction to it
yeah.
when I first saw it.
Yeah, like I didn't have that bad of a reaction, but now I can see how it got derailed. But when I was watching it, I didn't really think derailed. Yeah, so like I kind of had a higher opinion of it at the time of watching it than you did. But even when I kind of went there, we just kind of had this murder mystery that I realized had no actual importance to the plot. And like I didn't hate Artie at that point, honestly. I didn't think much of her and I didn't really care that much. Honestly, one of the biggest things when I was watching the show, and this is kind of funny because this is relatively minor, or it was based on a minor character. But one of the things that bugged the crap out of me, because there was one thing about that even when I was watching it I hated, was the manager. They were trying to talk about how he was this guy who always wants to do the right thing, and he was this nice guy, but then he completely betrays Satoru. I was kind of like, okay, when it happened, because I'm like, alright, he thinks he might have killed someone, so maybe that's like, I can be like, alright, even like somebody who wants to do the right thing, like that's like something you're torn about. It's like, do I trust my friend or do I think that the killing thing is like too much and I have to report it to the authorities? The thing that pissed me off with the manager was when he was saving Ari from the fire, the manager comes in and he's like, oh, don't be involved in her life anymore. And I'm like, okay, fine. But then he's like, and I'm taking credit for this. And I'm like, what? Is that what he's doing this for? Is just to take credit for being a hero? Because is he actually a dick?
Well, I mean, yeah, the implication there was that, I mean, he obviously wanted to, get with Irie. So the show was definitely trying to make him out to be like this weird, I don't necessarily want to say pedophile, but like definitely like a creep.
Yeah, I can see that. And that actually reminds me, this was actually something that was an issue in the first couple episodes. Because when you're talking about creep, it reminds me of Yuki. It was funny because he's kind of hard to remember, even though the first episode
Yuki.
establishes...
Holy crap, I totally forgot.
Yeah. Like, the first episode establishes Yuki as this major character, but he barely freaking shows up in the entire show.
No, they do, because they do keep bringing him up, but not enough, and not in an important way. Because Yuki, like, the whole point of Yuki throughout the show is to be, like, the red herring character. Like, you're supposed to suspect him over everybody else because, like, there aren't that many people that could have done the murder. Like, overall in the show, they're just not. It would either be a random guy or it would be, like, one of two people. And Yuki was supposed to be that other person. He was supposed to be the red herring that would throw you off. But unfortunately, Satoru at the beginning of the show blatantly says it was not Yuki. He says, I know Yuki, it couldn't have been him. He was framed. It was not, no chance of it being him. So you already know it's not him, pretty much. But then the rest of the show goes out of its way to barely accuse him of anything at all. Like, there's no suspicion thrown on him in any way. So he's almost a pointless character.
Well, there was kind of a thing. There was a really, really weak suspicion they cast on him, which was when Satoru was in his room, and then Satoru found, like, porno mags or something.
Yeah, because everybody who likes porn is a child murder.
Well, actually, specifically, one of them was, like, I think a schoolgirl's, like, uniform catalog. And it's like, alright, you can be like, that's kind of creepy, but, like, alright, people find you schoolgirls attractive. Like, that's not, like, that doesn't work.
Like, it's creepy, but it's not murder or creep.
Yeah. Like, that's the thing, is because the only thing, what I got from Yuki was that he was kind of, when I say this, it's going to be kind of funny, because this does make him to kind of look out to be a pedophile, but I kind of got a Michael Jackson tone from him.
Oh, okay.
because he struck me as a character, but this is like a good Michael Jackson tone without any sexual undertones that are harmful to children. It was because he struck me as a character who was like a kid, and he wanted to be like a kid, and that's why he hung out with little kids. But like he wasn't interested in them sexually, and I don't think they ever showed he was. It was just that he enjoyed like interacting with children because I got it from the way he acts, and Satoru specifically points this out that he had a heavy accent. I think he mentioned he had a stutter too.
Yeah, I mean, he might have had
yeah.
like some sort of like learning disability or something, or
Yeah,
just
and he struck me as that kind of character, and he probably was socially awkward around normal people, so it's easier for him probably to talk with a kid. But that's kind of the thing is like they didn't really build they didn't build him up as like an actual creep. They build him up as someone who just liked to hang out with kids, and that made it so that it was like when you're there, they didn't focus on him enough for him to be the killer, like ever, because like it was obvious, like in the same way that Satoru said that he couldn't be the killer. The show basically said it because they didn't focus on him at all. So they're like, it's obvious he's not the killer, so why are we focusing time on him?
yeah. Well, I
You
mean
know,
that
so like,
yeah. See that actually that you bring it up because I totally forgot he was in the show, but now that you bring it up, he's actually kind of an interesting character to have in this sort of plot because he too, much like Satoru, but in a different way, is an adult acting like a child. So that could have that could have related to the original idea we talked about of this nostalgic story where Satoru gets to relive his childhood rather than the killer plot. In terms of the killer plot, he was just a very very bad red herring. And
yeah,
that was
and that's kind of the
unfortunate.
thing is because that's kind of where the killer plot kind of drags the story down is because he's
It
there
drags
to
the story
serve
down
that.
everywhere because once
Yeah.
we get to talking about who the killer actually is, it turns out to be the most obvious suspect
Well,
in the
yeah.
entire series.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing is because Yuki was there to serve for the killer plot rather than to serve as a character.
And that's
And it
anything,
just
like anything that is there to serve the killer plot, which turned out to be almost everything in the show, was dragged down and simplified from what it was earlier in the show.
yeah.
This is
And just
exactly what happened in episode 5 and 6. That's why specifically when they happened, I'm like, I don't know about this show anymore. I was very, very excited about the first 4 episodes, specifically at the end of episode 3. Like a very good scene between Kaio and Satoru. I really love scenes like that are really like bright and well animated and just look really good. Um, there's like very emotional scenes that use animation to to kind of show the character's emotion. But after that, we didn't really get that. In episodes 5 and 6, everything becomes more grounded, more boring.
and also more plot holy
Yeah,
because then it completely destroys its own premise when
yeah,
it goes back in
because
time.
I mean, not only does it alter what I originally perceived the premise to be, but it also not only and it starts to focus more on this killer plot, but it also goes into a lot of other dumb things like introducing Irie's character and her backstory, even though she is almost completely pointless to the entire show. In
Oh,
fact,
yeah.
she's kind of completely pointless. Like you could write her out and it would be fine. And the same thing with the manager and the whole him getting caught by the police thing. Like he gets arrested by the police. That doesn't amount to anything either. Because the whole thing is with these episodes, like inherently in their nature, they're stupid because okay, for the first 4 episodes, or I guess episodes 2 to 4, he had a specific progression of what he was doing in the past. He was trying to save Kaio from the killer. Yeah, he developed with Kaio, had a relationship, blah blah. He fails. Done. In any other story, it would have been he fails, moving on. Now we go to the next plot point. Too bad, you fail. But in this story, for some reason, he gets to go back into the present, and then go back into the past, and then it's like, oh wait, you get another shot because this is a video game. All right, that's not how things work. That removes all tension. That means that if he had failed again later in the show, he would have just gone back to the present, and then he would have been being interrogated by the police, and then they would have put him in jail, and then he would have just gone back into the past again and gotten another shot, and that would have just happened until he succeeded.
He would have been like Kaio would have died again, and he'd be like, don't worry, I got another shot at this,
Yeah,
guys. And
yeah.
he just like lights up a cigarette and he puts his feet up.
As soon as you create a magically like a Deus Ex Machina like other chance for the protagonist, like all tension is lost. They're originally I thought this was going to be literally a story of him reliving his entire life. Now he goes back into the future, but he starts off as a kid, he's like 13 or whatever, and then he just lives that life trying to do it right until he's an adult, and that's it. And then we get to see what his life has turned out to be after all that. No, instead it's just literally this small span of like 2 months of time when he's a kid, and that's it. And he just gets to do it again. And guess what happens? Guess what happens in episodes like 7 through 8 or whatever? He goes back in time and he builds his relationship with Kaio, but instead of failing this time, he succeeds. Because what the hell else is he gonna do? It's a freaking plot. Like, he has to succeed. Like, what, are they gonna send him back in time to fail again?
It's like, all right, crap, I screwed up again. All right, I do over, and we're gonna get another season out of this, more money.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
it's like literally like a Dragon Ball situation where you can just bring people back or whatever. But like that was even more limited than this. Like in this, we don't know the limits. You could go back an infinite number of times. Like there's no threat, there's no tension, there's nothing.
Yeah, in fact, actually, and it's funny because when the first couple episodes were going, I thought, and like I knew once I saw that he failed, what was funny, and I expected him to fail anyways because I kind of felt like they were doing like a thing where they were like setting it up that he's like I succeeded and all that, and like I'm like, all right, so that means you're gonna fail.
Yeah, I mean that
'Cause he's,
definitely
like, too
implied it,
cocky.
but at the
Yeah.
same time when that was happening, I thought he was gonna fail to a degree, as in he would
Yeah.
fail in terms of like saving Kaio, but then maybe she would actually be like just kidnapped by the murderer, and then you have to like actually confront the murder. Because I'm fine with him
Yeah.
failing for the moment. They specifically addressed that he can fail. He can fail in the past. He can still make mistakes. Like he's human. He doesn't just know everything. So I thought he would fail temporarily and then save Kyle later, or possibly even. Although I would not have liked this. He could even just fail to save Kyle. Period. And then she's dead, and that's it. And now he has no other chances, and he just gets to live the rest of his life. And she,
Well, that what I thought was gonna happen from that point, that it would be like, okay, he fails, and then like, but he still got two other kids to save. They specifically set up that there were 3 kids that were gonna get killed, and this kind of goes into another issue with the structure, in that like there's 3 kids, but really only Kaio is important.
yeah.
And like the show's really obvious about that.
I mean,
and
that's
it's
kind of
stuff
the
like
thing,
that.
because if the show had taken the route of killing Kaio and then just being like, oh, I got 2 more kids I can save, that would have been both kind of weird, because that one, that's still like saying like, oh, even if one of your childhood friends dies, that's okay because you got 2 more. But it was also a case where Kaio was much more appealing overall compared to the other characters. So it would be really lame if she died and the other ones did not.
Well, one of them literally wasn't introduced until like
Yeah, one of them wasn't introduced until
right
forever,
before he
and the
went
other one
back
barely
to the
had a
present.
personality. So
Yeah. With Kaio specifically, I guess, is like, obvious she was really important, and as a character I liked her, but at the same time, even while watching the show, I was fully aware that she was basically everything that's the definition of like a Moe character. And Moe's not inherently bad, obviously. Nothing's inherently bad. The issue is that she wasn't really, like, she was a cool character, but I felt like it was lame because she was put in a situation where she couldn't do much to save herself. So it got into this situation where it was really just everyone being like, all right, we got to save Kaya. And so in that, we didn't really get to see as much of her as I would have liked. They still did a decent job of kind of showing interaction between her and Satoru, but at the same time, it's not really as engaging if one character is like predominantly the one who's kind of the force behind the relationship. It just kind of felt like this whole thing about protecting her, and like that, and it gave off this impression that feeling was more important, I feel like, than her as a character a lot of the time. So like that's kind of was my issue with her as like a Moe character.
well, I mean, like technically that feeling was more important. I mean, like both to the plot and to Satoru himself. Like he specifically went back in time not to relive his childhood nor to save his childhood friends, but specifically to save his mom in the future. And he just assumed that since he got sent back specifically to that time, it must relate to his mom's murder, which must mean that the killer of killer of these children in the past was somehow related to his mom's murder as well, which he was. But that would mean that his priority and his goal essentially is solely to protect Kaio, solely to protect or to catch the murder, and that's it. So his affection towards Kaio and the development of their relationship was a byproduct of this. It was like a side effect. It was something that I thought was interesting. I thought that was a good way to set that up, to have him go back in time and kind of be able to like live his childhood and like build these relationships with people that he never really knew about. I thought that was an interesting concept, and that, as I said, I thought that the series would continue with that, for years down the road, which would eventually probably make Kaio a character with more agency. Give her more things to do. Become her own person. Presumably after he saved her from the abuse of her mother, she would eventually develop into a more distinctive character. But the show didn't take that route, and but like as I said, like I can't really fault it too much in that aspect because literally Satoru's goal was specifically to protect her. And you can kind of tell by the end of the show that despite the fact that it did a very good job of building a relationship for the first couple episodes, that relationship doesn't really amount to that much outside of him protecting her.
Considering the fact how everything ends, is ultimately what it is. I just wish, for Kaio's sake as a character, I would have liked it that she could have been more active.
Yeah, Kaio was cool. I liked it. I was fully behind protecting her because I thought she was a cool person. Like I said, that would have required a longer show with more ambition to have them both live their lives just normally instead of having this killer thing.
Hint, hint. A1 Productions make season 2 be. We just erase everything that happened, and then it's just about them.
Yeah, that's why it's called erased, because it's the first season was erased from existence, and now we have a second season.
Yeah, there you go.
But also, if you're not aware, it's based on a manga that already ended, and that it's not going to happen.
It's crazier things have happened.
Crazier things have happened and will happen, but unfortunately, not with this.
So, going from Kaio, let's go to the other end of the spectrum, Artie.
And I necessarily call that the other end, but yeah, too bad. Artie's bad. What a bad character.
And I feel like, and what's funny is I feel like most people really understand that she's bad.
I hope so.
Because I think so, because whenever I've kind of seen people write and make videos about their opinion of the show, like her being a point against the show was really kind of consistent. And I feel like, and it's funny because a lot of the times people go for that kind of character, just like the perky, yeah, I'm cool, like girl, chick who has no real personality and just kind of is there to be supportive. But for her specifically, it was a big issue because, and this kind of goes in the fact where I didn't mind her in the first episode, but then I minded her more in the 5 and 6 and past that. Because
past
you
5
got
and 6.
Past 5 and 6.
Yeah, like the 1 second that she shows up.
Yeah. Well, I minded her a lot when she showed up in the last episode. It was kind of funny because she said the least in that, but I probably minded her the most there. By contrast, after we've gone to the past and kind of gotten these characters that are actual characters, we just get this cartoon chick, and it's she's kind of like Jar Jar Binks. Is honestly my best comparison point. She's actually literally exactly like Jar Jar Binks. I'm gonna go ahead and go all out.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, no, I'm going all out with this. Okay, because let's just look at her character. Because we have Kaio, who's got abusive parents, and granted the abuse thing does get kind of comical with its ridiculousness, but it's still dark, and it still is actually used to fortify her as a character. Whereas, and just everyone really in the past, they have the blonde-haired kid, I forget his name.
His name is Kenya.
Kenya. He was cool because he was still kind of outside a lot of the time, but he was the person who kind of understood Satoru's plight the most, which was weird, 'cause, what he wanted to do, and he was acted as Satoru's confidant, so you kind of got a relationship with there. But then you go back to Ari, and they really have no relationship. We really don't know why she likes him so much, and then they try, and it's yeah, it's pretty much that. And then what kind of I feel cements her as just being the cartoon rabbit of the show is that we get her backstory, which is their attempt to fit her into the dynamic of the show by being oh, her father was
what was weird about that backstory is that the show often failed due to being too over the top, whereas her backstory failed due to being way too under the top.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of over the top about something under
it
the
was
top. because he stole a candy bar and that apparently ruined his life. He didn't even do it. He was framed for stealing a candy bar, and then everyone freaked out.
Yeah.
Because like in real life, it'd be like, all right, I think you stole a candy bar. It's like I didn't do it. Okay.
All right.
You're
Have a good day.
we might ban you from this store. Or like I guess the thing might be in Japan that might be kind of a big deal, but like it's still a candy bar.
Yeah,
like
it's probably not that big a deal.
Yeah. Like I would assume in Japan it'd be a bigger deal than it is over here, because in Japan generally doing that stuff is much more frowned upon, but it wouldn't be like literally your entire life is ruined. And like even then, by comparison, we're talking about a character whose father, so which already further separates this because it's not her. She's not the one who kind of went through the situation. Her father is, who got ostracized. Her mom, Ari's mom, was like, "Oh, I think you might have done it," and then he left, and then he quit his job or something. So I don't even know if he was ostracized. It was just kind of that he ostracized himself. But this was over a candy bar. Like when you're telling a story, like you don't really
Don't
that
use candy
equated.
bars.
Yeah, like that's what it is. Like, cause it's just ridiculous. Like it doesn't work because it's just like the equating of somebody getting abused by their parents to like your parents was framed for stealing a candy bar is ridiculous. And so, like, it just made it cartoony, because it's just, like, and it's even more cartoony because Sartru takes it seriously.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, like, he's just, like, oh, I feel like when she was telling the story, like, he was about to laugh, but then, like, the producers waved money in his face and reminded him he can't, they'll take that away if he laughs at it. So then he's like, okay.
I mean, that was it, because I mean, you could always say that the purpose of Irie as a character is to establish that, that theme of trust in the show. Again, it's very important to put trust in people and to, I say you rely on others but help others. And, Irie fits into that, as well as to give Satoru an ally in the future. Because they're probably like, hey, he needs somebody that can help him out. But two things. One, no, he doesn't. It would be far more interesting if he was alone in the future. Two, wait, probably more than two things. But anyway, two, as I said, the story should not have gone back into the future. The focus should be entirely on the past. Putting the focus in the future is, in my opinion, not good. But then also three, that firmly cements the two episodes 5 and 6 as completely and entirely pointless. I mean, as I said before, the fact that he goes back into the present just to be able to redo the Kaido events in the past effectively make all sort of tension in the past meaningless, because it means that he can always go back to the future and then just come back and redo things. But then on top of that, it's not like we learned anything else. The only events that occurred is Satoru escaped the police a few times and then was arrested by the police. Other than that, it was Irie's backstory. Irie's backstory is both stupid and pointless. And Satoru getting arrested by the police is pointless. Which means everything in the present was pointless. Which means we just wasted 2 episodes of a 12-episode series for like no reason. To just kind of make it worse.
It really is funny because just looking back on it, episodes 5 and 6 is really the derailing point, because it's just even like the basic things about the show. So moving away from Ari, one of the things that was kind of always an issue about the show was how it had no real sense of subtlety ever, in terms of like, abuse and like the themes it was doing and foreshadowing. And what's funny is that there was always this thing they did where when people were going to be evil, they had red eyes. Which, on a side note, they did so much that I thought that the show was going to turn out to be about an evil cult
Yeah,
story.
I know about that.
And like, I was like, that'd be weird. And I'm like, don't do that. And like, what really made me think that, because at first I was just like, okay, so that's just, the red eyes is just when people are being evil. But the thing is that made me think that it was going to be this weird-ass twist was because, I don't know if you noticed, but do you remember, like, the reporter guy who was friends with Satoru's mother?
Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, after he got off the phone with Satoru in the future, he has red eyes.
Well, yeah,
and I'm like, okay.
They did that as one of the several completely implausible red herrings that didn't fool anyone.
But like that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
and they
because they didn't
never
shock you. the
Yeah,
exact
but, like,
problem with
that's-
the show.
Yeah, like, I guess that is what it is. But, like, it's weird because, like, they try to shock you, but then he literally never, ever makes any other attempt. Or, like, nothing he does makes it look like he's the killer. Like, they just do that, and I'm like, oh, wait, so he's evil. And,
Yeah, but he's not.
like,
He's
then
just some
he
guy.
just wasn't evil. Yeah. So, like, I didn't really get what that was about. But, and really everything about the show in terms of, like, foreshadowing and stuff was just, like, terrible. I mean, now that we're talking about it, you know, when we get to, like, who the killer is, I
Who
was
is the
able to
killer?
guess who it was.
You
Huh?
know, for everyone who's watching this without seeing the show. You know,
Yeah.
guess who the killer?
Yeah, because, like, literally, like, I didn't know who the killer was. You were much further in the show than I was before I started it, but you didn't spoil anything for me other than saying that you thought the show kind of starts sucking at 5 and 6. But, like, literally, the second I saw Yashiro, I was like, he's the teacher. Or wait, no, well, I knew he was the teacher, but I knew he's the
The
killer.
second I saw
He's-
Yashiro,
yeah,
I knew he was their homeroom teacher. I mean, he
So-
was standing at the front of the class. He had a suit on. He was telling the kids what to do. What an
Like,
asshole.
it was so obvious the entire time. It's the perfect crime. No, but so, I mean, there was some personal expectations that kind of fueled that, which was mainly that he looked and acted exactly like Adachi from Persona 4.
And what's really funny is that when he's actually
Hmm.
revealed as the killer, he also makes a face exactly like Adachi.
Yeah. So, like, that was a big reason why I thought
And
it
when I
was.
was watching it with my friends and he was revealed, they're like, this guy's exactly like Adachi.
Yeah, like, he's literally just basically Adachi. Well, except Adachi was an actually interesting character. But, and also the ending didn't happen with Adachi. Well, the ending is its own thing, and that needs to be talked about, and Spectacular Glory is its own whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like, the whole deal with Yashiro is just that, like, not only was he obviously the villain, because they kept framing him as the villain by putting him in shadow and making him sneak up on people and just be kind of generally suspicious, but he was also blatantly the killer because no one else in the series could be the killer. So either you were going to have a random guy that's never showed up before be the killer, or you were going to have Yashiro be the killer. Those were the only options.
Yeah. I mean, every episode with him in it basically played out with him coming up going like, hey, kids, I'm your...
Your friendly neighborhood Yashiro.
Yeah, I'm your friendly neighborhood teacher, and I'm gonna help you, and I won't totally molest you. And, like, that was what it was, because, like, he'd always come up from behind you, and, like, he was always strangely there, and, like, oh god, with the foreshadowing later when, like, they were actually going into him being the killer was, like, the worst thing ever. The worst, obviously, and I feel like everyone can agree on this, was when Satoru finds his stash of pedophile candy, and the show continues as if it's not abundantly clear that he's the freaking killer.
Yeah, and it was
Like,
weird
come on.
because it was like, it was almost like a joke because like he opens the drawer in his car and then a bunch of candy comes out, and then Yashiro was just like, oh, I'm like an ex-smoker and like I gotta use this candy to like calm down or whatever, and like what's his face, Satoru was like very obviously like distraught by this, like he's like, oh god, I don't know what's the guy up to, this seems extremely suspicious, and then like that's it, and then the show just drops it. And it's just like, oh, well, I mean, he sure is suspicious, but I guess he's okay, you know?
Well, actually, what's funny is the show didn't drop it entirely, because it became even more funny, because a little bit later, and this was still before they revealed that he was the killer, there was a scene where, I forget why he was saying it, but Satoru was talking about substitutions or something. And he was like, and he had to make this specific point where he's like Yashiro with the candy, it was a substitution. And I'm like, you're really going to point this out without just addressing the fact that he's the killer? Like, it's done. Like, you already fucked up the first time. Why are you going back to this to remind us you fucked up about this? Like, and then even past that, like, they did the whole thing, like, when he found the candy, he already, like, he started doing that tapping thing, which was obviously evil. because he was just doing it like he was obviously being annoyed by them being in the car and stuff, and like it just kept going, and I don't get it because like by that point, like when you find the pedophile candy, that's when you reveal it. And the show was about to do it, but then they just didn't, and then they were acting like there were still other suspects. By then, there were no other suspects, period.
Yeah, well,
Like, not even just because of that. I think past that point, they had no focus at all
yeah.
on anyone else as a
I
suspect.
mean, yeah, even prior to
I
that
think-
point, there was still very little focus on Yuki, who was the only other potential suspect. Like, every other character in the show is a kid. They wouldn't have been the murderer at that time unless they also have time travel powers, which could have been a possibility, but that never happened. And it was never implied.
What's funny is that there was actually a police report in the show that had a list of suspects, and we didn't learn anything about them. And Yashiro was on the list of suspects.
Well, I mean,
and
I guess that makes sense because he was closely tied to most of the kids who did it. But yeah, he was on the list of suspects, which makes it more obvious.
And Satoru saw the list of suspects, and he specifically pointed out after he found out he was the killer that he said he like mentally discarded him as actually being a suspect. And like, you have a list of suspects, you should probably check those out if you're trying to figure out who the killer
See
is.
if he's the only person you're in contact with. Like that could have possibly be. Like I don't know, like let's go through, like the most obvious.
Yeah. And there was other things, like there was the point where Satoru, after they hide Kaio in the bus, and like the mysterious person. Well, first of all, it's in a school bus, and then there's a killer hiding stuff in it. We know of somebody who's able to access school grounds, who's the primary, like, who's one of the primary characters of the show. And then on top of that, Satoru tells him, and he only tells him about the fact that Kaio was in the bus, and that so that means that only he knew that they were in the place where they found the supplies, like the killer supplies, and then they disappear literally or immediately after, and then again, like, Satoru doesn't find that weird that he immediately tells someone, and then the next day the evidence is gone. Like, you should probably piece that together. That's a little obvious. And it's just like stuff like that, like issues with foreshadowing. Show basically didn't have foreshadowing. It just outright told you what was going to happen. And it kind of goes into the whole thing, which is not even just the foreshadowing, just like when something, the show very much so followed the philosophy, if something's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. It's like Akemi, who was just like a ridiculous person because like she just loved abusing Kaio and doing it in like the most like ridiculous way possible. She just like started kicking her and like being as evil as possible around people about it. Like it'd be like, oh, like they had that scene that's always in these abuse stories where they'll be like, oh, why do you have those bruises? And then she's like, I fell. And I'm like, you could have said something else. Like, you didn't need to say the thing everyone always says when they're getting abused.
Like, oh, I got beat up by my mom.
Yeah. I don't know, something. But like, she was and like there was also the scene where Kaio was missing for a few days, and so like they go to her freaking out in the room, and she's just like breaking up her room, and I'm like, is this Citizen Kane now? Is this gonna win an award for best room wrecking
win an
scene?
award for best something.
Yeah, I don't know. And so like there was just like issues with that.
Yeah, and then what was great about all that is her excuse at the end, where she's like, oh, I had an abusive husband, so clearly I have to abuse my child. Am I right, guys?
Yeah. That was, because that one annoyed me, because, alright, it's fine to do, like, a circle of violence lesson, because that's, like,
But that was, like,
reasonable,
barely a circle
like, that's
of
in
violence
everything.
lesson. Like, we have no reason to, like, care about this character or have any affection towards her. Like, if we actually knew, like, the kind of person she was, you know, prior to being abused or whatever, that might have been something. But no, we know nothing about her character other than she's a cruel bitch. And on top of that, the show doesn't even make much of an effort to do it. Like, her mom is all like, oh, I feel bad for you because, you know, you were abused. But Satoru and his mom don't care. Like, no one cares, because why would they? And she gets taken away.
I thought that was good that the show. Well, no, because here's the thing: is the show kind of acted like she was sympathetic,
It
but then the
acted like she was
characters
more
didn't.
sympathetic than she should have been. But it's
Yeah.
also a case where the show paid so little attention to it that I don't even know why it was brought up in the first place.
Yeah, and also it goes into effect again. Like I don't know what the hell happened with the Cammy's husband. What was he? Because he was obviously an accomplice in the abuse, but like he was never addressed.
He was probably
he just kind of stopped.
like a boyfriend or whatever, like after the original husband was abusive, and then she got like a boyfriend now.
I guess I don't know. It's weird because like he seemed to be like a major part in the abuse, but then he just never really. He only showed up in a few scenes. Like they
Yeah.
had the scene where a Kemi was dunking Kaio's head in ice water to like get rid of bruises, which I don't know if that actually works. And he was just like, "Oh, save some of that ice for me." And it's just like weird because like he was there in the background, so I expected him to be kind of important, but he wasn't. And like he had no arc, he had no anything. He was just there, and he kind of looked like a Kemi too. So I'm like, are they related or something? Is this gonna be some sort of incest thing?
Yeah, I mean,
But
that was
like
just
he
like
went.
one of the things where like the show had these ideas that it just brought up, and it didn't really develop them. And it did like address them and it concluded them, but it didn't do anything with them. It just like, it's the whole deal where, like, why even make the story take place in the past when he's a kid or whatever? Why have the time travel mechanic? If it's just going to be a murder mystery, have it all take place in the past, or have it all take place in the present. There's no reason for the time travel mechanic because there was nothing. He didn't learn anything from becoming a child. He didn't, actually get to relive his life or learn from his mistakes or do whatever. He just went back, and then he became an adult again, and then that was it.
And it kind of goes into Yoshiro because if you think about it, he's kind of the big problem because he kind of embodies everything because he's the killer, so he was the one ruining the plot the entire time in his insidious plan to murder, the quality of the Erase show. And they never acknowledge that crime in the show. So it's a bit of a bittersweet ending for the show if you think about it. It's a real thinker there, but so he's the killer. He's ridiculously over the top.
Yeah, like extremely over the top.
Yeah,
That's what I didn't even get because like every bad guy was like so cartoonish.
Yeah. Like, I mean, because when he gives his little monologue about how, like, when he was a kid, one of his classmates gave him a bunch of hamsters, and then he put all his hamsters in a jar and let them drown, and then he raised the one that survived by standing on the corpses of the other hamsters. And then apparently he showed his mom, and his mom didn't care. So I was like, okay. But, like, that's kind of the point, is, like, there's the excess right there. Is just like this ridiculous story that just kind of needs to be there to be like, yeah, this guy's a killer, and he was cruel to animals because that's what killers do, man. They're cruel to animals and stuff. And so he's excess. He also is involved with the ending, which the ending was the worst thing ever. And he kind of had all these really weird things into the plot where like he becomes this person in a high position of power, but that really doesn't matter to the show because he's dealt with and not at all the way like he was able to kind of annoy Satoru in the present in episodes 5 and 6, but he didn't do anything else with that power. Like, he's just dealt with by, they're like, you're the killer. And he's like, yeah, I'm the killer. And then they deal with this thing. And, like, and that goes into the ending where we find out that he's basically in love with Satoru or something.
No, I wouldn't quite say that. And also, like, another thing that you can say he ruined is the fact that like, in a way, he sort of represents this idea of trust, between kids and adults especially. Like in a community of mistrust, as I mentioned before, that was established by the show, of the fact that these kids are being killed off or kidnapped, and there's abusive parents, and there's kind of like shit going down in the community. He was always an adult the characters could rely on, but by being the killer, he goes literally directly against that theme. That like the one adult that you can trust in your life is also completely untrustworthy. So now it's just kind of random. you don't know who you can trust or who your friends are. It's just like whatever. Like you just live your life and hope your teacher's not a killer.
But then they kind of, I guess, tried to go against that because then they're like, I don't know what his thing with Satoru was. Like, that's why the ending was so terrible, was because that made no sense.
Okay, so the point
Like,
is,
yeah.
moving into the ending, right?
Yeah.
I guess for basic recap of the previous thing. So Satoru finally manages to save Kaio, and discovers that Yashiro, who is his teacher, is the killer. In fact, he reveals himself in very spectacular fashion. Then he decides to take a car that is not his and traps Satoru in it and drives the car into a nearby river, thus hoping to drown him, which somehow puts Satoru in a coma for 15 years. So flash forward, no, not 15. Actually, I think he wound up in 2003, so it might have been less. It might have been like 12 or something.
What's funny is I think a coma for 15 years is potentially something that can happen from drowning, but you'd probably suffer major brain damage if it did that.
And also,
And
I'm also confused as to what exactly happened there to put him in a coma for 15 years, because he was drowning in a car. Like, there was no one around. In order for him,
I think Yoshiro might have saved him.
did he? Because the
I don't even know.
I mean, I guess that
don't
could be
know.
implied, but it's a very strange scenario because he's put into a car, yeah, and he's locked in and he just falls into the river, and like he would. I mean, obviously that the car would take a bit to fill up, but I assume he would drown fairly quickly. It wouldn't be a case where like by the time somebody came by, he would most likely be dead. I don't see them, saving him in the next few minutes because Yashiro would still probably be around. I mean, he was leaving on foot. He drove the car into the river. If they just show up right there, they'd be like, wait, why is this guy walking away from a crime scene? So like by the time they actually got to him, he would probably have drowned, especially by the time they actually pulled the car up. I don't see that being coma-inducing. I see that being dead character. And which is also something kind of interesting that I've heard brought up, is that it could have been a case where Satoru could have actually died in that scenario, and then we follow Kenya around, who was always a very strange character because he was way too mature, way too super informed about everything. It made no sense. I assumed he was going to be like another time traveler, like Satoru, because he just always seemed way too collected and like he knew way too much for a kid his age.
What's funny is I actually kept assuming Kaio and Kenya were that.
Yeah, I mean, that's
because
possible.
Like Kaio would approach him and she'd be like, we're alike, Satoru, because we're both liars. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because like I'm assuming, because like that made me think, what, is she also a time traveler? And like then Kenya was weirdly mature, and he also was like, I understand what you're going through stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everyone had
Like,
a
they
lot
both
of
kept,
cryptic messages. The entire show was just it seemed to be building up to a lot more than it was. Overall, it was a small story that pretty much involved one friendship / murder case. Satoru has to befriend Kaio, and then he catches the killer. He did have to befriend the two other, the girl like Aya or whatever, and Midori or something, whatever. The other one. He had to befriend them, but he did so in about an episode with not much effort. Because it wasn't a big part of the plot.
Oh, it was Hiromi.
Hiromi. There you go.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was the whole thing. As I said, I assumed it would not only span most of his life, but I also assumed there would be far more epic situations, like maybe more time travel stuff with potentially other time travelers, or him traveling into the future, or other more action based scenarios. I mean, in the theme song, which I really like, they have a lot of scenes of him. Of Satoru being caught in an explosion, or walking through a snowstorm, or being shot at. None of this happens in the show. Like, what was that show? I wanted to watch that. Instead of...
Well, there's also other things in the opening where, like, they have the scene where you see Satoru and they have superimposed behind Sachiko, Kaio, and Artie. And, like, what's just funny about that is because that obviously implies that Artie is supposed to be as important as the other two, and she's not.
Yeah,
She's barely in the show. Barely in the show. She's
barely in the show, and she could have easily been written out of the show.
And also, what really annoyed me about that is because it's kind of even further implied by the opening, because that scene, it's like it starts out blue, and then it turns red, which kind of signifies that they die. But then Adi didn't die. So I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
also
why
assume
she's
that.
there.
I assume
Yeah.
that they would either die or at least be in danger of dying. In fact, I assume the show would have multiple arcs that would focus on him trying to save all three of them individually. Like he failed to save his mom, so he has to go back and save Kaio. Then he has to save Irie, which I thought episodes 5 and 6 would do, but they didn't. And then he would go and save his mom, but none of that happened. I even thought that since that particular part of the opening where it focuses on the three main women and Totoro's in the background, I thought it was going to actually be a case where, it almost seemed like a spoiler because it showed Satoru in white and then it showed the man with the hat from episode 1 who was the killer in red, and it just shifted to that. So it seemed to almost be implying that the man in the hat would be Satoru. So I was even thinking that they were going to go for some weird time travel thing where the actual killer would turn out to be Satoru from another dimension or something, which I don't know if I would have liked because that might be a little too crazy. But it could have been something interesting. It could have been something where, maybe he goes back in time and winds up screwing up his own life and turns himself into some crazy psychopath. And then he has to go back, he has to travel through time again in order to stop himself. I feel like that might be a cool show too. Or hell, why is it called Erased? He was never erased. No one was. That would have been something. It would have been cool. Like he went back in time and had to stop his own existence because he turned out to be such a huge asshole. He had to kill himself, or potentially he somehow went back in time and erased his own existence. And now he somehow still exists, quote unquote, but like outside of the time continuum. So no one knows him, and he has to kind of bring himself back into existence. Whatever, those are cool shows. But like just standard murder mystery, what was even the point of the time travel?
See, what it should have been is that he goes back in time, and then during that scene where Kaio and his mom are bathing, and he's clearly aroused by that, he discovers that he's actually a pedophile, and then that sparks his transformation into the killer from the future.
Yeah, I mean that's sure. Like that was a weird.
That was yeah,
that
that was a
actually
very weird scene.
that actually leads strangely into the ending because the ending seems to imply that Satoru and Yashiro are not really one and the same, but like kind of part of each other. Like Yashiro somehow it only feels complete with Satoru, which is very strange. Like in what way? Like they're somewhat related due to the weird pedophile thing, but like other than that.
I mean, that was a pretty big thing in the show, honestly. It was because it was very obvious that from a kid's, even like he's an adult in a kid's body, but he's clearly sexually aroused by Kaya. So there is kind of a weird pedophile thing going.
It is a,
and on
it
top
is a
of that,
weird situation, but it's also
yeah.
something I find somewhat excusable due to the fact that, in Kaio is still his age. So it's something that I felt like they were setting up that romance specifically to be that once he does become an adult again, then he would get with Kai.
Well, yeah,
which is
true.
specifically not what happens at all, which I thought was very stupid. Where Kaio winds up with Hiromi or whatever, like the one character that they had no relationship with. I'm not saying
nobody had a relationship.
Yeah,
I mean, well, I guess they did, but they didn't focus on it at all.
I'm not saying that the hero always needs to get the girl or whatever, but it's a case where Kaio and Satoru had developed a relationship, and I thought that him developing a relationship with her over time for many years would have been an interesting story. You could have a plot with nostalgic time travel, romance, and a murder mystery. That would be like a cool mix of genres there. Instead, she just winds up with Hiromi to just be this random thing where it's like, oh, I guess she's happy now or whatever, but like it's not interesting. It's not a gripping story. And also the very end of the show seems to imply that Satoru will wind up with Irie, which is even less gripping because not only is Irie an awful character, but she's also significantly younger than he is.
16, baby.
Yeah.
16's old enough for me,
He's like
baby.
16 and he's like 29. In fact, if the ending still takes place in 2003, that would make her like 13.
Oh, that's depressing. God. Why would Artie go out with this guy? She's a high school student working at a pizza, like a job, like a pizza joint. That's fine, and he's like he's a full-grown man doing it.
Well, I mean,
like
by the end of the series, he is a successful manga artist. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, but she's clearly into him before then.
Yeah.
So like that's just weird. Like that's just ridiculous because he's clearly like he's somebody who doesn't really have a plan for his life, and like I don't know. That's also kind of adds to the ridiculousness of like how she's just overly supportive of him.
Yeah,
and how the relationship is just all.
She was willing to like throw her entire life away in order to support this man in episodes 5 and 6. When she did trust him obviously, but like you can't trust him that much. Like he could still have done it. Like
Yeah.
Be a little suspicious.
I mean, how long was he even working at the pizzeria? Did they even say?
I think they had met like at the beginning of the series. I don't think that they had like an ongoing relationship.
And I feel like they knew each other for a while because he worked part-time. I don't think he started. I don't think he had just started that job at the beginning of the anime. I got the impression that he was doing it for a while up till then.
Well, I mean, the point is that it was still. I mean, this conversation is kind of revealing all the holes that Erased had throughout its entire run, and I really feel like what saved the show for most of it was like the direction and the general style of the show, like how well made it was. It was not the plot. In terms of that, especially in terms of this Iris situation, it just seemed like very typical wish fulfillment, just kind of like shonen light novel stuff. Like, oh, here's Guy, and then he gets the cute girl who's spunky and always trust him because why not? He's the main character.
Well, and speaking of ending up places, and the story had to end, and so yeah, so just
He comes
with
out
that
of his coma.
ending, yeah, he comes out of his coma, and we kind of get some stuff where he has amnesia. He just kind of regains it because he touches a baby's hand.
Yeah, he touches Kaio's baby's hand,
Yeah,
and then he regains his memory.
Yeah. And I thought that was kind of a cop-out
Yeah,
because, like, I kind of felt like there was going to be, like, some sort of actual, like, effort to bring his memory back, and,
Yeah,
like,
why
that
didn't they
would
just
be the result.
have him keep his memories in the first place if that was just going to be it? I mean, they probably wanted to do a touching moment with him and the baby, but, like, and, like, I do understand that. I understand the fact that he was, he obviously wanted to protect Kaio. That became his desire, and, like, although his desire initially was to just have her alive, he eventually grew to have a relationship with her. So, he actually cared about her as a person. So, like, that's fine. But it's still not that interesting.
Yeah. And, like, so he gets his memory back, and basically, and before he got his memory back, Yashiro shows up in the last few episodes, and he's kind of acting friendly again, and nobody knows he did it. So, he hangs around the hospital and kind of talks to Satoru.
Yeah, nobody knows he did it, even though Kenya and Hiromi are still investigating this murder after like 15 years.
Yeah, that doesn't even make any sense at that point.
Like, he was not that hard to catch.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Satoru did it.
Satoru did it as a kid with like no resources. Like the freaking Kenya is now a lawyer. Like, he can get like a full blown investigation on, or like anything, or like freaking like just go into the man's car and find all his candy.
Well, technically they couldn't prosecute him for his candy, but
they could prosecute him because he would then immediately just start laughing maniacally and lock you in his car and try to drive you into the river.
You'd be like, do that, and then it'd be like, all right, stop this car now. And it'd be like, okay. And then that'd be the end of it, because, like, he can only harm the kids.
Am I going to jail?
And so they talk, and, or, they kind of have, like, part of the episode's kind of devoted to the fact that, like, Yashiro and Satoru are talking as kind of on terms again. And basically, what it kind of ends up is that one, he tries to frame Satoru for the killing of, like, I guess it's this other patient who has cancer or something. That's my impression because she was bald, so I was assuming it was like chemo or something. And he's going to push him off the roof, except what's revealed, and, like, the stupidest possible conclusion they could have done to this, is that apparently he had no intention of killing him, so I don't know why he brought him up to the roof. Because he needs Satoru to live.
He had no intention of killing him. It was a case where he fully intended to frame Satoru for this murder, but when it actually came time for him to kill Satoru, he couldn't go through with it, even though Satoru was actively, egging him on and like pushing himself to be killed.
Yeah, I guess, and that was kind of a random jump to conclusion on Satoru's part. Because they had a whole plan based on this too. Was that?
Yeah, it was stupid. Like, I mean, this is where like everything, like every element of the show, just kind of comes together to be the stupidest possible thing it could be.
Because like, he basically reveals that this was all part of like a big plan to get him to, I guess, admit it, and
yeah, to get him to realize that he needed Satoru to live. Because because as I said, like the situation was that he fully intended to kill Satoru, but he realized mid murder attempt that he needed Satoru to live, and Satoru obviously didn't want himself dead, so him and his friends somehow foresaw this, and they knew that there was like a little gap on the roof that
on that specific edge
yeah,
of
on
the
that
side of
specific
the
edge
building.
that was that Yashiro intended to push him off of. Nowhere else. If he pushed him somewhere else, he'd be screwed. And so they put like this giant safety net under it, which would or like a bean bag. And it was completely retarded because I would not save his life in real life, but okay. But yeah, so then they put like this net to catch him.
No, I think it was an actual like I don't know.
It was like a
I
big,
think
like,
it was
cushion.
like an actual like I think it was actually like a safety net thing, like they would use for people to get out of a burning building.
Maybe
I don't know how they
but
got it.
like,
Fucking.
that was pretty high up. Like I don't know if that would have kept saved.
I think it might have, but I think the better question is I have no freaking idea how they had access
Yeah,
to
and he was
it.
also jumping hospitalized with like unfunctional, like non-functioning
true.
legs. And he didn't even like jump. Like I'm pretty sure in order to like survive on that, you gotta like jump correctly. Like he just kind of fell while on a wheelchair.
I
It's
mean,
just an
well, what
overall
was
pet
funny
situation.
about that? Yeah, what was funny about that? He made Yashiro realize that he didn't want to kill him, but then Yashiro let go of the wheelchair.
Well, yeah, I don't know. 'Cause I don't. I guess he couldn't hold out or whatever. I don't know. It was weird.
I guess I don't know.
But hell, he
I
could have
mean,
missed. Like, what if he just missed landing on the thing?
I mean, what should have happened is like Yashiro's just like no, he just like pushes him off a ledge, and then like it just cuts to his friends sitting there, and they're like, "So when the hell is he gonna fall?"
And
And
you
then
see
like
him falling
somebody
out the
goes to
window.
one of the other sides of the building, and they're like, "Oh."
Like, when is he gonna fall? And then you just see like a window in the background. You see Satoru like going past the window.
Well, like
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
Yashiro
so, like-
freaking like stands on the roof, like with his arms spread, like he's gonna jump. After Satoru falls, so like it seems like he's gonna kill himself, but then he realizes that Satoru lived, and then he
Yeah. Oh, I was cracking up at that scene.
yeah, because
like
not
I
only
was
it
I was
insanely
hysterical
gay,
laughing.
but it also came out of nowhere, and it was just like they tried to do this thing where to try and give Yashiro some depth, but it was depth that didn't mean anything. It was just depth that was like, oh hey, for some reason I need you because that was always established to be a part of my character. I wasn't just some crazy like weird pedophile guy. I was I was actually. My real problem was that I was looking for a rival to complete me.
Yeah, which also was never freaking like. Actually, they kind of did a little bit with the hamster thing, because that I guess kind of established that Yashiro respected people who were able to survive in big circumstances. But like first of all, that still only showed up in like the last few episodes.
Yeah.
Which goes into the fact that we didn't really understand Yashiro as a person for the vast majority of the series, and why the twist didn't work is because him and Satoru did not spend that much time together
Yeah, I mean-
actually learning about each other as people. Most of what they did was help Kaya.
What should have been done in this case is that since the villain was so obvious, if they really wanted to go with like a murder mystery plot, is they should have revealed him fairly early on and then spent the rest of the show developing the character.
Yeah, like see that would have been cool because like
Then they
that
could
would
have had
worked
this
for
sort of thing.
dramatic irony
Yeah,
of the audience knowing, but then and then that would make it kind of more tense as to what's gonna happen when Satoru finds
not
out.
even
he's the
necessarily
killer.
just the audience knowing. They could have Satoru know, but like he's a kid, he can't prove that this guy did it. Like then the rest of the show could then develop their relationship together and explain why exactly is Yashiro grew to need Satoru, to have him be such an important part of his life. Maybe he was just looking for a rival. Maybe he was just bored, looking for something to do, whatever. But have the development. Don't just bring it up at the last minute. Instead, they decided to go like the most shonen route possible and give him the stupid like sort of sympathetic villain excuse, and then do this thing where it's like Satoru's like, I could never beat you by myself, but now I can beat you with my friends who just may have a safety net or whatever. Because like, what does that even mean? Like, what the hell? Like, he caught him by himself. He did everything by himself, but then just jumping off a roof with a safety net requires your friends. Like, what the heck? You can just call like the fire department or whatever.
It's like if I didn't have friends, then this plan of mine would not be a good
Like,
plan
yeah,
at all.
like that's the thing.
In
Like,
fact, now that I think about it, even with friends, it wasn't a good plan, but it happened to work out. So there you go,
I mean,
friends.
that's kind of the whole thing, because like that could have been the original message of the story. As I said, if if the story had developed as I originally stated, with he starts off as a kid and then he freaking grows up to be an adult, and now he's a much happier person because of his friends. Then that would, his friends didn't get killed. Now, he spent time with them, whatever, and then he develops into a good person and a good adult, and he's happy. And then the moral of the story is blatantly the friends helped him out. They essentially saved his life from being like a miserable 29-year-old pizza delivery man or whatever. But in this case, it's not. The friends didn't do that much. He saved them. They didn't do anything for him.
Like a lot, yeah, that. And actually, on a minor note, kind of talking about, I mentioned, I started talking about it earlier, about the thing where he mentions in the beginning of the series that revival tends to end badly for him. The way the show kind of tried, I guess, to keep that going was the coma, I think. What he said at the end of the series, he's like, well, I lost 15 years of my life, but then he's like, he accepted it. But the thing is this is why that didn't work, is because he didn't lose 15 years of his life.
Yeah.
He already lived 15 years of his life already.
He just did not gain 15 years of his life.
Yeah, exactly. Like, literally, like, if anything, you can almost see the 15 years as being kind of convenient, because it's like, all right, if he didn't, like, now he just gets to kind of go back to where he was.
Yeah.
Instead of having to, like, wait for 15 years or whatever for life to get back to where he was a mangaka again.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, because, like, if they were going to do with, like, revival, like, sort of punishment or, like, something the bad that happens, they could easily have done a case where, despite everything that he did for all his friends, since he was in a coma for 15 years, for some reason things just went wrong. Maybe the friends forgot about him, or maybe some of them died, or whatever. Maybe some of them just moved away, or anything. Like, they could have actually made it more unfortunate or more interesting. But it's just a case where everything just turned out perfectly. He was in a wheelchair for a couple weeks, but okay, other than that, he's fine.
He had to learn how to walk again.
Like, he even meets Irie again, which is completely stupid, because he meets Irie without the circumstances of having the pizza delivery job. So it's like he was fated to meet her, like, regardless. Which is, again, stupid, because it's a case where, like, they're clearly trying to build up this romance with him, but she's, like, 16 and not interesting.
See, what's funny, because and speaking of the Irie ending thing, and this is kind of what I was thinking about when it was happening, it was annoying to me because it was, like, the most obvious, like, happy ending thing. To just be like, there was no real consequence for him messing with time.
Yeah, and it was not only was the most obvious happy ending thing, but it was also the stupid case where, like I said, like if he had developed over time, then it would have been interesting to see. Oh, now this is his life, like this is what he made of himself after getting a second chance to relive his life. But in this case, no, it's just now that he's in the present, he's just somehow a manga artist. He wasn't before, but now he is. Why? Whatever, he just is.
Yeah. The Butterfly Effect starring Ashton Kutcher can do it. You can do it, Erase.
Hey, they should make an Erase live-action movie starring Ashton Kutcher.
Alright.
Like, I think that would work out pretty well.
They already did. It's called The Butterfly Effect.
Well, there you go. I mean, that had a more appropriate ending. Like, that was the thing, because, like, there was, like, throughout this entire show, like, essentially the conclusion I can come to after watching the entire show is that the mystery wasn't good. The emotional aspect of him reliving his childhood wasn't good, because they barely did it after the first 3 episodes. The romance wasn't good, again, because, I mean, they were building something up with Kyle, but then Kyle just winds up with this other dude. Any Irie situation was pointless and stupid and shouldn't even have been in the show. And like, overall, the entire show was almost pointless. Yeah, it was a murder mystery. It was literally only a murder mystery. And the murder mystery was not good. And other than that, like, there was no character development or growth or anything. So at the end of the day, the show just kind of becomes pointless. It becomes a case where there was this guy who was not a manga artist, and then through a bunch of convoluted scenarios that weren't very interesting, he became a manga artist.
Like, everything just kind of ends out the best. Messing with the timeline is good, and it's cool, and there's no problems.
Yeah, messing with the timeline is hip. That's what all the cool kids do.
And what's funny is that he still has this power, so he can continue to just, undo any other problems he has in his life.
Yeah,
so
probably.
it's like literally he has no problems in his life. Wait, actually,
No,
I
actually,
feel
no.
like
At the
no.
end of the series, I think he says that he doesn't revive anymore.
I think
Which effectively,
yeah.
literally is shorthand from the show of saying I have no problems anymore.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, that's why I was just like, wait, because I remembered they said that, and yeah, that was. Yeah, that's why. Um, so yeah, that's just really funny, and like, so I'm pretty much in the same boat with that. The mystery wasn't good, like at all, and the emotional aspects about really it was Kaio and Satoru's relationship. That was the good part,
No, well,
and
I mean,
then they,
and his mom, you know. But once again,
yeah, and his mom.
it didn't. The mom didn't amount to much. I mean, I thought the mom was gonna be part of like, oh, she knew that there was like the secret conspiracy behind everything. Well, like, and honestly, she was just a reporter who knew about the murder. Like, whatever. You know, like I thought maybe it was something where like she knew about the time travel powers. You know, she knew there was like some crazy organization behind whatever. No, they just, you know, I was investigating the murder, kind of.
Yeah, I don't know. It was weird, but yeah, I think so. That's
It just kind of all amounted to far, far less than it should have been,
then what?
based on the first couple episodes and the opening and the overall pretty good direction. Pretty good, not amazing, but very good.
Yeah. Also, the ending theme sequence is ripped off from Birdie the Mighty. I just
Yeah,
wanna
yeah,
say
it is.
that. But it's obviously not as great because Birdie the Mighty has the greatest ending theme sequence ever created in anything. So.
Well, there you go. That's a good way to end it on. You know, Birdie the Mighty, at least superior in ending theme to this show.
Yeah. Vote Bernie